that it isn't a one size fits all. And knowing your learning audience, knowing what the needs for the learning objectives are, and any external forces like accreditation and stuff really are part of the context that we're working in. And so if anything, I sort of think of this as having a mindset around grading less or judging less, and having students be more proactive in that process. And I'll share that at the beginning of, I was quite worried when I introduced this to students in the course at the beginning of fall. And so it was an invitation. I said, I'm trying this. This is an experiment. I'm going to keep checking in with you to make sure that everyone's feeling comfortable with the process as we move forward. But know that if you need to step out of this process and for me to go a more conventional approach with grading for you, that's an open opportunity. No one took me up on that opportunity, but I certainly did have to have many one-on-one meetings with people to reassure people about where they were, what their standing in the course was, and so on, so that they could have their minds put at ease, because it is such a different approach. It's not only different for me as the faculty member, but they have gone through a whole system. These are graduate students that I was working with, have gone through a whole, their whole lives with a grading structure that was very focused on summative evaluations of their performance, leading to a final grade of A through F. And so it was very different for them as well. I think that offering that flexibility to people, saying, if this structure isn't working for you, please let me know and we'll pull back from it, and I'll work with you to make sure that you know where you stand moving forward, I think can be a helpful way of introducing these ideas to students. But it really does take time and structure. It isn't a way of getting out of work as a faculty member. It actually created more work for me, but the work was rewarding because I was actually working with individual students or small groups of students, and really felt like I was having a direct impact on their learning and on their practice. It was actually a really powerful experience. And even though it was more time consuming, I absolutely intend to do it again in the fall. It's appropriate for the students in this group, appropriate for the content of this course, and appropriate given the context of this course in terms of where it is in the program.
Yeah, more really good comments in the chat. And what Parsons, Trisha, was saying, it's around the workload, because it's absolutely, from my experience, not less work. It's less about the concept of grading. It's more about, I'd say, the concept of feedback. And ideally, we really want to give students meaningful, specific, focus forward feedback that helps them improve future behavior. So it's definitely still a heavy lift. And one of my questions is how to make this whole idea of not grading scalable. But maybe we'll start with our first question for the group. And it's about the instructor's role. And we've touched on that a little bit, but I want to open it up to others who are struggling or already have some ideas on how to manage what is the instructor's role if you don't have grades in the class. Are you taking more of a front seat, a back seat? How does that look different?
Alexis, this is Greg. I think Joni touched on it a little bit, but
Perfect.
I would assume that there's a lot of upfront communication that is necessary, whether that's just as simple as putting stuff in a syllabus. I think that would be one part of it, but I think you would have to really communicate what you're doing, why you're doing it, maybe even introduce some research associated with the topic. And then I think part two of that would be to be receptive to the feedback that you are likely to get from students who may say, you know, I really need a grade. And I think Joni mentioned, if I understood correctly, that it was sort of a voluntary option if they wanted to participate. So that's my response, or not really a question.
Thanks for sharing.
Yes, just to reinforce that, I did treat it as an invitation. And although I sort of assumed the default was all in to the ungrading approach, I did make sure that everyone knew that if it wasn't working for them, it wasn't, people mentioned that anxiety piece. One of the goals is to lower anxiety. And so if what I was doing was increasing anxiety, that was going against my instructional goal. And so I made sure that they knew, boy, if I'm increasing anxiety with this approach, we need to talk. And I really tried to, with having lots of open meetings early on and meeting with individual students throughout, there were lots of opportunities for me to check in with people one-on-one to make sure that it was working for them. And and I didn't have anyone indicate that it wasn't working for them, but there were times when people just needed more guidance from me about how they should be looking at their own work and whether they were meeting, again, that idea of having hidden expectations. They were concerned that I had hidden expectations that I hadn't shared, and they were worried that they weren't meeting those expectations. And I love that question. Is there room for both? And my thinking is that yes, again, to reinforce, there's not like you've got to be all in or you can't do it. I think that there may be certain activities, even within a particular course, where there's some activities that are definitely summatively graded, and there's no additional feedback and opportunity to resubmit, for example, that this is we're grading these activities, but other activities that are more formative and that we're going to very much be involved in a feedback and revision looping, and that they will be ungraded. I think you can have it all. I think you can, why not? I think you can have it all.
There's a question thinking about the workload in terms of ungrading. And this is where I think it often involves, it comes down to what your role is, how you're defining that role, and also what the student's role is, which is another question we had, our second question. And so maybe that's what I want to ask others first. Is there a way to set it up so that with, like Nina's explaining, lots of students, lots of classes, she already has a lot of grading each week. How do you manage the workload to make sure that it's not overwhelming for you? Is there something we do more to make it the onus more on students that still makes sense?
One of the things that I think about, and this does relate to that, definitely that scalability question as well, is that an important instructional goal that I have in all of my online courses has to do with social presence and creating learning community. It's a big goal that I have. I spend a lot of time thinking about it. I spend a lot of time considering activities and even the tools and platforms that I use to support people building relationships and getting to know each other and so on, especially in courses in which I'm asking people to take risks, to share their work with others and engage in peer critique, to work collaboratively together, that I really need to build that learning community in an online course. So I have found that my approach to feedback in an ungraded course, in the ungraded course, my approach to feedback with lots of one-on-one and one to small group meetings actually also at the same time helps me achieve this very critical instructional goal that I have around social presence and building learning community. And so although it is an investment of my time and energy for sure, it is helping me achieve multiple goals, instructional goals, as well as support students' achievement of the learning objectives. So I feel like it's doing double duty, if you will, for me to invest that time and energy. And I find those meetings one-on-one or one in small groups to be much more efficient for me than me trying to type in all of my responses and so on. We can do a structured walkthrough of their work in Zoom and they can show me what they've done and I can respond immediately. There's an efficiency to that I really appreciate.
Can I add a comment about time? I've been doing some ungrading and in some courses that's doing ungrading. For me, I gave up on rubrics. So I'm gaining a lot of time back by throwing out the rubrics and just looking at the content the students are giving me and if they're reaching the level that I want them to. And I do a lot of not yet language and give them another chance. And it's a little bit more time, but I feel like my students are succeeding through this adverse time, especially. They feel supported because I'm giving them another chance instead of just punishing them, if that makes sense. So, you know, I think time is a concern, but you just pick and choose what you focus on and you just structure the time you're giving, if that makes sense. And I love the comments about the science part. I teach anthropology, which is there's some anatomy, and it's, you know, I love that point about doctors. And well, I want someone who got an A to do surgery and stuff, but also that's just memorization. Is that really learning the material? You know, these exams in anatomy and physiology are really hard, but it's only measuring your ability to memorize, not actually understanding the content, if that makes sense. So thank you for letting us talk.
Well, thank you for sharing that because, and such great comments in chat as well. Thank you, everyone. That I feel like for me, this ungraded mindset for me, what it really reinforces is the idea of that I'm going to provide, if I'm going to give this much time for feedback, that then I'm going to make sure that there's time for revision, for improvement, for enhancement. I'm going to build that into the structure. So ungrading and feedback also comes with this other piece, which is that they've got to be able to have time and encouragement to do something with that feedback. It's got to be built into the system as well. That we're working towards mastery of the learning objectives, not simply or solely doing well on a particular summative exam. And so it's to the point that some of you have made around my ability to memorize in preparation for doing well on an exam versus working on something, getting feedback, revising and resubmitting in order to know that I have mastered it is what I think an ungrading approach can help support, is that sort of focus on mastery as opposed to grading.
And I also think that ungrading can lead to a willingness to play and experiment in ways that graded doesn't. When people are stressed about, am I doing exactly what the professor wants in order to get an A? That's what they're focusing on. When it's, I need to do these things and kind of explore with these concepts because I'm simply going to get credit for trying, then they let themselves experiment more. So I teach things like literary theory and literature. So a lot of exploration is kind of imperative. And in my lit theory classes, when they read a theorist, all I'm asking for is that they show that they've tried to play with the concepts, and that's what they get. They're ungraded, you know, like I give them I saw something about a boom pass fail, and I kind of use that. It's you tried, yay, you tried, and you're getting some of these really cool ideas, and here's some feedback that kind of leads you in some interesting directions. And that's all they need, because what I want is, did you try to understand SART? You know, did you try to play with it? Not did you master it, because nobody masters SART.
I think that's a great example. And it goes back to sometimes how we even build instructions. And I know when faculty talk about a discussion board flopping, but that like nobody really had a discussion, but I see their assignment is like it has to use correct APA style. It has to be a minimum of 250 words. You have to have 3 citations. You have to answer all these points. And there's so many like check boxes that you have to mark off because it's so prescriptive. Well, you're not really encouraging maybe free expression. And so the result, like, did they do what you expected? You can't maybe expect them to do something you didn't encourage through your instructions. So some of your comments made me think of that. And I think it's exciting just to see some of the ideas in the chat about little things to try. Nothing is ever like, let's redesign, let's reapproach everything all at once. And even our next question, which we've already thought about or talked about a little, is on having a place for both grading and ungrading. And I think this is a good chance to have more formative assessments and not just summative assessments, and encourage some more freedom through your assignments, and really make it about expanding your learning and the process and all that good stuff. Other ideas for those who maybe try to balance both grading and ungrading.
So I have something that I try. I mean, in my classes that something that I've started doing that I cannot say I got this for myself. So I did not. I went to conferences and did professional development. They're like, try this. And I'm like, okay. So I would say that I actually have tried to change a lot of I do a lot more either test and mastery or formative, in a sense you just get credit for doing it, because I already had started this scaffolding system in many of my classes where I was trying to get higher blooms. But when you have things for a grade and they were so worried about doing it that they didn't take the time to understand half the questions that I was asking. And I decided I wanted to be able to go deeper, but the only way to go deeper is if they do the initial part, right? Otherwise you can't go anywhere. So what I've done is, and this is, to each its own, but what I've done is I have cut out a lot of my assignments that I really loved and just merged them into one assignment to allow for more on the why and not necessarily the memorization. But then I've also have like very simple questions that are multiple choice and true and false that are just basic memorization that they can and they get credit for doing this stuff. And I do a lot of, like, if we're in class, we'll just do it as groups, which kind of like they can use each other's brains. And then I just come in and I do corrections because I feel like sometimes they do better when they're in smaller groups. And I feel like that has been really helpful. But the biggest thing I would say that has been the most work that I've done is that I have a new testing setup where Almost all my quizzes are unlimited attempts. And it's really interesting. You wouldn't think, like, you would think that they would ace it, and sometimes they do. But if you're taking it like 10 times, I feel like you're going to be ready for that exam, right? And then my exams are, one part of it is unlimited attempts. It's more low level blooms, like more memorization, multiple choice, true and false, that kind of stuff. But then the second part of the exam is higher level and is all just short answer questions. And the students absolutely love that. Like they're the ones who decided it, because I think it's a lot of work. Separating your exam out into two parts is never an easy feat. And then making sure like they're both timed, but the part A that's unlimited is actually less time. And it's less questions. And then the other one is, they actually equal up to what an exam would be. The difference is that they have one that they can take unlimited times, and then the other one opens later so that they can take that. So I don't know, for me, that's been helpful. I don't know if you would find that helpful, but it's been pretty good for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's very, I love hearing everyone's sort of approach to these types of ideas and the structures that they're putting in place and so on. We have about 5 minutes left together to talk about this. And so I know that we want to make sure that if there are any sort of burning questions that people have about ungrading or any of the topics we've been talking about, let's be sure to address them in our final moments together.
Can I add something to this conversation?
Yes.
So I let my students choose the grading strategy or the grading approach, and I find that instead of imposing like specs grading or contract grading or pass or fail, it gives them buy-in, because they all vote, and so they never vote for standard grading. I give them the choice. I'm like, here's these 4 different grading systems, and I'm biased towards specs grading, and I tell them that, like, I'm just very upfront with that. But they all of my classes voted for specs grading, and then a few students in each classes wanted traditional grading, and I said, okay, of course. So here's what happens. If you don't revise a paper, it just converts to a traditional grade, right? So if you don't hit that pass fail mark, then I slap a grade on it. So you can have a traditional within a specs approach, and so they all get it. It's very simple, right? Like, because I don't want to overwhelm them with, okay, here's 6 different grading systems or whatever. So I just to put that out there.
That's great. That kind of student agency is so powerful. I have a colleague who is still doing conventional grading, but has a system in place where he is able to track this pretty easily, where the students can, within sort of frames of percentage points, can determine all the tests are going to equal between 10 and 25% of your final grade. What do you want? And so those who do better with tests, they'll say, I want 25%. So they're all graded on the same items, but they get to choose what the percentage is that those items reflect final grade. So even those types of opportunities for students to be sort of co-creators of that can be really positive.
All right.
Any final burning questions?
Yeah, definitely.
This is such a great topic, and I would love to, it would be great. I wish we'd had a Google Doc where everyone was, instead of putting it in chat, they're putting all of their contributions to a master document that we could all then swipe from later when we try to enhance these ideas in our own practice. But it's been so wonderful for you all to share your great work and your great ideas about this.
Joni, this is what
The chat will get saved as, like, whoever is hosting this will have a transcript of it. So just start us a Google Doc.
It definitely will. I definitely will. I'll include the link to it in the presentation slides, and everyone, the URL again for that is right there.
And
We'll
I
keep the
just
conversation going.
saved the chat. So
And Joni and Alexis, this is Greg. So we're coming close to the end here. Another option is if you guys want to create a channel in Discord, we can set that up for you if you'd like. And then anyone here in the presentation today can go to that channel as well. If that's an option, just let me know. You can send me an email or just put it in Discord and say, hey, I want a channel for this topic. Either way is fine. So with that, I want to thank both Alexis and Joni. Alexis, thanks for working through the old internet connection issues that we've all faced. Just momentary blip here and there. Otherwise, it was just fine. So thank you for your great presentation today. Thanks for the people that attended, and we look forward to your participation as we go through the rest of today and tomorrow.
thank you all.
Bye.